Hello to all who watch this video. I'm Bunmei. Today we have a theory of Izuku, so get your popcorn ready. This is about to begin.
What would have happened if Izuku fell in love with Shoto Fem, Chapter 1. Lemon Cake. The green-haired boy proudly and enthusiastically bragged about his dessert, as if it was a culinary masterpiece. Although he wouldn't openly admit it, especially after the two failed attempts that resulted in burnt desserts. Sumi Todoroki arched an eyebrow at the sight of the dessert in front of her. Lemon cake, she questioned, a faint smile on her lips. But don't say it that way yours. You make me feel like this pie is the worst thing in the world, Izuku smiled nervously, his eyes sparkling with excitement. The being mean to me thing, leave it to Kaken, he does well in that role, since that idiot is a jerk to everyone. Since a couple of days ago, Izuku Midoriya and Sumi Todoroki had met by chance at night in the living room of the UA Academy rooms. Since then they began to share their sleepless nights with a little company. Sumi took a small piece of the dessert and brought it towards her mouth. The taste of sweet lemon accompanied by a thin layer of cookie instantly astounded her senses. "It's very tasty, Midoriya," she commented with a surprised expression, admiring the taste even more than the desserts her sister used to make. "Isn't it?" exclaimed Izuku excitedly, his mouth full of that lemon dessert. His face lit up with a beaming smile as he watched Sumi enjoy the sweet treat. Sumi looked at Izuku's lemon pie-stained face and, at the boy's confused look, removed some of that pie with her hand and brought it up to her own mouth, her eyes meeting Izuku's in a moment of complicity. "Huh?" Izuku's cheeks filled with red at the girl's action, his eyes shining with surprise and shyness at the unexpected gesture. Well, he wouldn't say it, but that gesture was too sexy. "Is something wrong?" Sumi asked, her face serious and almost devoid of emotion, puzzling Izuku a bit. Izuku wondered to himself, why didn't she feel embarrassed at such an action? It was almost like a kiss. "And no, nothing," laughed Izuku nervously, standing up. I'll go to the bathroom, I'll be right back." She excused herself, her voice slightly cracking in surprise and shyness. She quickly walked away from there, still keeping the red tint on her cheeks and her heart extremely accelerated. Before disappearing altogether, she took one last glance back. "That was fucking sexy, but it was also a nice gesture," she muttered with a small smile, continuing on her way. After a few seconds when Izuku was gone, Sumi let out a long sigh as she herself did not expect to do such a daring action. Her heart was pounding, almost as if it was about to burst out of her body. The small blush on her cheeks betrayed her embarrassment. She moved her hand to her chest trying to calm her heart. "Silly, I did it without thinking," she chided herself, a shy smile curving her lips. For she liked the feel of Izuku's face and she thought her friend's blushing face was cute. Sumi stood upright and walked to the balcony of the living room. As she stepped outside, she was greeted by the first faint gusts of cool autumn wind on her face. Her long hair down to mid-back moved fluidly. "It's a nice night," Sumi said softly. Izuku appeared behind her and positioned himself at her side, his presence comforting in the stillness of the night. "You're right. It's a nice night," she said, her voice soft as a caress in the wind. "Especially being with the important people by your side." A brief silence enveloped their environment where only the sound of leaves flying freely through the air was present, creating an atmosphere of peace and tranquility. "Would you like some more lemon tart?" offered Izuku, moving his plate towards her with a warm and friendly smile. With a small smile, Sumi watched Izuku's green eyes, her gaze full of kindness and affection. "Of course." She took the plate in her hands with gratitude and appreciation. Izuku returned the smile accompanied by a faint blush on her cheeks, her heart pounding at Sumi's closeness. He stared at the girl with a tender gaze, their friendship growing with each shared moment. Sumi gave him a smile. Then she looked up at the starry sky. "You're right, everything is better when you have the right company." Her eyes now turned to the emerald-colored eyes of her friend. Izuku gave him a smile. And on an impulse he felt inside him, Izuku stroked his hair affectionately. "Everything is better if we are together," he said without thinking about what it could mean to his friend. Sumi's gaze was filled with embarrassment at Izuku's cute words, her heart pounding under the moonlight. "Since when are you so bold, Midoriya?" she replied shyly, averting her gaze sheepishly, but having a slight smile on her face. And so the two enjoyed their dessert in comfortable silence. A mysterious person watched all this and had mixed feelings. But she withdrew because she knew that this special moment belonged to Izuku and Sumi. Chapter 2. Dango. The sweet aroma of freshly prepared dangos filled the room as Izuku and Sumi settled on the couch, ready to enjoy their quiet evening together. Tonight's night will be some dango skewers. Izuku took a seat next to Sumi, carefully placing the plate in front of them. The TV in front of them was the only thing illuminating the dark empty living room, where only the two of them and the strange dark figure in the corner of the room were present. "Oh!" Sumi exclaimed, quickly drawing the skewers towards her excitedly. She took one of the dumplings and dipped it in sweet sauce, bringing it to her mouth with delight. This is delicious, Izuku, you really excelled yourself today. I'm glad you liked it." Izuku smiled, relieved that he liked it and watching Sumi enjoy her culinary creation. They seemed to be a simple dessert, but for someone like me with zero culinary skills it was quite a challenge. Sumi nodded with a smile, savoring another bite before responding. "Wow, they definitely don't look like it. They look amazing," Sumi exclaimed enthusiastically. Izuku felt a bead of sweat run down his forehead as he remembered the mess he had made in the kitchen, which had provoked Professor Aizawa's scolding and, as punishment, he had been sent to clean the bathrooms. Reminiscing about how his teacher had burst into the kitchen, only to get a glass of water and find the chaos Izuku had created, made him scratch the back of his neck sheepishly, trying to push that memory out of his mind. "But hey, knowing that you liked it makes all the effort worth it," Izuku added with a happy smile. The blush on Sumi's cheeks intensified even more at Izuku's words, as she felt her heart pounding in her chest. Thank you," Sumi murmured, feeling embarrassment flood her cheeks as she looked away, fiddling with the dango stick between her fingers. "Is something wrong?" Izuku asked, noticing Sumi's sudden discomfort. A few seconds of silence stretched between them, until Sumi finally mustered the courage to act. "Midoriya," Sumi stammered, catching Izuku's attention. "Could you look over there with me?" Intrigued, Izuku agreed and turned his gaze to where Sumi was pointing, having no idea what was about to happen. "What's wrong, too?" Izuku started to ask, but before he could finish, he was surprised by the sudden movement of Sumi, who approached him and planted a soft kiss on his cheek. "Thank you, Izuku," Sumi said with a shy smile, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. "I'll look forward to trying your next dessert." With a mixture of surprise and excitement, Izuku watched Sumi walk away, leaving behind a trace of blush on her cheeks and a racing heart in her chest. "Huh?" Izuku muttered, his face burning with embarrassment as he struggled to find the right words. Suddenly, his body gave in to the overwhelming sensation, and he fell backwards about to hit the ground. "Aizu!" Mina exclaimed, running towards him and catching him before he hit the ground. "Say something to me." Mina looked at Izuku, who lay there, completely flushed and about to faint. With a sympathetic smile, Mina gently stroked Izuku's hair as she looked at him affectionately. "You're an adorable fool, you know, fainting over a simple kiss," she murmured, her eyes shining with a mixture of affection and sadness. He knew Izuku's heart belonged to Sumi, but that didn't make his own feelings any less real. Before unconsciousness completely took over, Mina bowed her head and deposited a soft kiss on Izuku's forehead. "Rest, Izuku," she whispered tenderly, wishing he could find the happiness he deserved, even if it meant it would be with someone else and not her. "I love you," she whispered softly, wishing she was the girl Izuku was in love with. But she understood that she could not force love. A tear escaped from her eyes, echoing in the darkness of the room. The choked sobs of the girl who used to radiate joy filled the room with a sense of sadness, revealing her painful longing. In that moment of vulnerability, Mina allowed herself to feel the weight of her broken heart, accepting that some love stories are meant to remain in the gloom. With a heavy sigh, she wiped away her tears and promised herself to move on, even if it hurts she should accept reality. Chapter 3. Taiyaki. The Japanese fish-shaped dessert known as taiyaki is a delicious delicacy. On a quiet night, the darkness of the room was softened by the faint glimmers of the moon streaming through the half-open curtains. This time, the sweet aroma of freshly prepared taiyaki filled the air as Izuku carefully placed them on a plate. Ready to try the taiyaki, Todoroki?" Izuku asked with a warm smile, as he settled next to her on the sofa. "I'm always ready when it comes to food," replied Sumi with a glint of enthusiasm in her eyes, though her voice also denoted some restrained emotion. The conversation between them flowed naturally, and soon Izuku shared an anecdote about how he discovered he could control his quirk while enjoying some taiyaki with Gran Torino. Sumi listened attentively, with an expression of interest that did not go unnoticed by Izuku. "Do you identify yourself as a fish?" Sumi asked curiously, tilting her head slightly. "What? No, I only came to that conclusion when," Izuku tried to explain himself, but was interrupted by Sumi's infectious laughter. Sumi's laughter filled the room, as it was funny to see how nervous he got sometimes. She closed her eyes for a moment, everything seemed to stop and she really felt happy, as it had been a long time since she felt at peace with her life. She opened her eyes, and without thinking, she let out a few words that revealed a little about her true feelings. "I think you're more charming than a fish, I definitely prefer you." The silence that followed was palpable, but not awkward. Instead, it was charged with a sweet intimacy that enveloped them like a warm blanket on a cold night. Izuku felt warmth rise to his cheeks, while Sumi shyly hid behind his arms, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. "Silly. Silly. You must control yourself or he'll catch on to your feelings." Sumi mentally scolded herself, averting her gaze to Izuku discreetly. Well, she didn't know what Izuku would say with what she said. Quickly the boy took the initiative and attracted the plate with the desserts towards him and offered a couple to the girl, who gladly began to eat one of them. The soft texture of the bread and the creamy chocolate filling intoxicated her palate instantly. "The only good thing about my insomnia is this." Sumi let out a small smile as she watched Izuku eat with a big smile. "Thank you," Izuku suddenly blurted out, surprising Sumi with his words. "Thank you for being with me. From the beginning you could have just left me here, but you decided to stay and try the desserts that sometimes came out burnt or sometimes just lacked something," the boy confessed while having a smile. Izuku moved his gaze to Sumi. Although the room lacked illumination, the moonlight did its job shining Sumi's beauty. Her soft hair, bright eyes and faint blush on her face, all accompanied by a slight awkward smile. It may not be much in someone else's eyes, but, to me, it's the best thing ever. Izuku gave Sumi a smile, one of those smiles that only he knows how to give. "You are my hero, Sumi." Sumi's heart was beating fiercely. Her face was progressively burning from Izuku's first words. Her hands trembled slightly and the involuntary smile on her face grew bigger and bigger. "Fool, you are my hero and not the other way around," she whispered in embarrassment. Without warning, a sound of something falling echoed in the room. Sumi stuck as close as she could to Izuku. Their bodies were closer together than ever and their heavy breaths from nerves danced as they mingled with each other. Sumi dropped her head on Izuku's shoulder, who moved his hand until he found hers. "Why, you are my hero." Sumi finally spoke directly to Izuku. "You were the one who didn't leave me alone here and prepared desserts for me. Even though they came out somewhat wrong in the first few attempts, you tried your best and in the end you gave me the best things I've ever tasted in my entire life." Sumi snuggled a little closer to Izuku, looking for a comfortable position. Izuku had a soft smile, watching Sumi settle in, reminding her of kitten behavior. Thank you for being in my life, Izuku." Sumi looked up at him, noticing a faint blush on his cheeks. Don't hate me, okay?" Sumi whispered and, quickly, moved even closer to him. At Izuku's confusion at what she said, Sumi gently caressed Izuku's face and left a small kiss on his chin. Izuku blushed from the kiss. "I could never hate you, Sumi." Izuku drew Sumi closer in a warm embrace. And as was customary that night, silence once again reigned over them. But in no instant was it one of discomfort. It was a silence that was comfortable for both of them, where, as every night, they were the protagonists of their own story. Chapter 4. Mochi. Tomorrow the exams start, everyone rests, even Izuku. A faint sigh escaped Sumi's lips. "I really envy them." Her hands, soft and delicate, slid up to her face, gently caressing her tired skin. The darkness of the room was palpable, and Sumi felt more alone than ever. The soft sound of the wind coming from the window was her only company in that moment of loneliness. "I miss Izuku," she confessed in a whisper, as if talking to herself. Her gaze drifted to the clock hanging on the wall, finally deciding to return to her room. Even Izuku had his limits to be with her. Sumi stood up and took one last look at the place they used to share every night. She sighed and made her way towards the exit. "I found you," the barely audible voice startled her. She instantly recognized the owner of that voice, despite the darkness that enveloped them. "Izuku," she whispered, her voice barely a murmur in the gloom. "Weren't you asleep?" he asked with curiosity and excitement as it meant he could be with Izuku. "I couldn't leave alone the girl who is always willing to taste my failed desserts," Izuku replied with a hint of humor, approaching her with a leisurely pace. As he got closer, the moonbeams subtly illuminated their faces, revealing Izuku's warm smile and the blush on Sumi's cheeks. It was evident that Izuku was being exceptionally affectionate that night. He approached and without her expecting it, he gave her a kiss on her forehead. "Ha!" Sumi opened her eyes when she felt Izuku's lips, and with a big blush she watched him go to the kitchen and come back with something in his hands. It was a recipe that caught Sumi's interest. "Today I wanted to make mochi. It's one of my favorite desserts and I wanted to share it with you." Sumi watched with interest as Izuku prepared to make the mochi. The tenderness of the gesture did not go unnoticed by her, and a smile formed on her lips as she realized how much it meant to Izuku to share these moments together. "Can I help you with anything?" Sumi asked, approaching Izuku with genuine interest in learning. "Sure," Izuku replied, with a beaming smile. "It'll be fun to make them together. Come, I'll show you how it's done." Sumi hesitated at first, feeling a little shy at the idea of helping Izuku in the kitchen. However, before she could refuse, Izuku gently took her arm, surprising her. "Come on, Sumi, don't worry. It will be fun to do it together," Izuku said with an encouraging smile, leading her towards the kitchen. Sumi felt overwhelmed by Izuku's closeness, and a blush tinged her cheeks as he placed her in front of him, pointing out the ingredients and explaining how they should be prepared. Should I really be here? I don't want to ruin anything," Sumi muttered, feeling a little uncomfortable but excited at the same time. Izuku gave her a comforting look and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Of course you do, Sumi. Trust yourself, I know you'll do great. Besides, being together makes everything even more special," he answered softly, looking at her with those eyes full of trust and warmth that always made her feel special. Sumi was overcome with a surge of emotion at Izuku's words. Despite her shyness, she felt happier and happier to be there, sharing this moment with him. As they continued to cook together, the spark of excitement Sumi felt only grew with every interaction, with every kind gesture and every word of encouragement from Izuku. And in those moments, she couldn't help but think about how incredibly sexy he looked, with her in front of him, and him behind, guiding her with his expert hands and soft voice. It was an overwhelming, but thrilling feeling, and Sumi knew that moment would be etched in her memory forever. After a while of working together, Sumi finally managed to make something for herself in the kitchen. An excitement shone in her eyes as she realized what she had accomplished. "I did it. Look, Izuku, I did it," Sumi exclaimed excitedly, proudly showing the result of her work. Izuku looked at her with a beaming smile, genuinely excited about his accomplishment. "Awesome, Sumi, you did great," Izuku replied, feeling pride welling up in his chest as he saw the gleam of happiness in Sumi's eyes. Sumi was overwhelmed with excitement and joy shared with Izuku. She had accomplished something she had never imagined before, and she had done it together with the person who had stolen her heart with her gentleness and kindness. "Thank you, Izuku. I couldn't have done it without your help and support. I'm very happy to have done it with you," Sumi said with a bright smile, looking at Izuku with gratitude and affection. Izuku approached her and gave her a warm hug, feeling the special connection they shared at that moment. "I'm happy too, Sumi. Thank you for always being by my side and for making this moment an unforgettable one. You are amazing," Izuku answered sincerely, feeling the warmth of Sumi's embrace enveloping him. Sumi was overwhelmed by Izuku's words, feeling her heart pounding in her chest as they embraced each other with affection and gratitude. "You are the best, Izuku. I love you so much," Sumi whispered, feeling happiness fill her heart at that moment. Izuku looked into her eyes tenderly, feeling a surge of love and gratitude for the amazing girl in front of him. And I'm here for you, Sumi. I will always be here for you, supporting you in everything you need. You are special to me. Izuku replied, sealing his words with a soft kiss on Sumi's forehead. And at that moment, Sumi knew that she had found someone very special in Izuku, someone who had stolen her heart with his gentleness, kindness, and unconditional love. After preparing the matchas together, Sumi and Izuku sat across from each other, enjoying every bite of the delight they had created. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and joyful conversation as they shared this special moment. These matchas are amazing, aren't they, Sumi? Izuku commented with a smile, savoring another bite with gusto. Sumi nodded enthusiastically, but a small shadow of worry crossed her face when Izuku casually mentioned something. Come to think of it, they look a bit like Ochiko. Izuku took a mochi between his hands and squeezed it, laughing at the action. They look just alike, said Izuku with a slightly amused tone, not realizing the effect his words would have on Sumi. Izuku's laughter was the only thing heard between the two of them. Sumi merely watched him as she let her stomach churn and her breathing become heavy. Sumi's heart contracted at the mention of Uraraka's name. A strange and unfamiliar feeling began to grow in her chest, filling her with doubts and insecurities. Without a word, Sumi abruptly rose from her seat and walked away, ignoring Izuku's concerned questions as she became lost in her own thoughts. Izuku looked at her with confusion and concern, not understanding what had just happened. He wondered what he had said wrong to make Sumi react that way. Sumi, wait. What's wrong? Izuku called out, getting up to follow her, but Sumi was already too far away to hear him. Sumi was walking through the corridors of the Class 1A dormitories, lost in her thoughts and emotions. She felt confused and hurt by the mention of Uraraka, not understanding why that simple phrase had affected her feelings so much. Meanwhile, Izuku was following her closely, concerned for her well-being and wanting to understand what was going on in Sumi's mind. Sumi, please talk to me. I don't understand what happened. Izuku insisted, finally reaching her and placing a hand gently on her shoulder to stop her. Sumi stopped, feeling tears threatening to fall from her eyes as she struggled to find the right words to explain what she was feeling at that moment. Let go Midoriya, I'm tired and I'm going to sleep. Izuku was perplexed at Sumi's abruptness, watching her as she hurried away towards her room. A whirlwind of emotions swept over him, leaving him confused and worried about what had just happened. Sumi. He called in a soft voice, but received no response. He stood in place for a few moments, not knowing what to do. He decided to respect her wish to be alone and stood there, in the middle of the hallway, wondering what had caused such a reaction in her. After a moment of reflection, she decided to pick up the mochi dishes and carry them back to the kitchen. As she did so, her mind was filled with confused thoughts and unanswered questions. Meanwhile, in her room, Sumi dropped heavily onto the bed, feeling the weight of confusion and sadness. Her emotions were conflicting, and she couldn't help but wonder what Izuku's mention of Uraraka meant. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to push away the thoughts that were tormenting her, but they kept hovering in her mind, refusing to go away. She realized that she could no longer ignore what she was feeling and that she needed to talk to Izuku about it. Izuku decided to talk to her best friend, Mina Ashido, to ask for her advice. Mina plopped down on Izuku's bed with a mischievous smile, ready to hear what her friend and love interest had to say. Izuku, for his part, sat down next to her and began to relate what happened with Sumi, feeling a knot in his stomach as he spoke. You see, we were enjoying the matchas I prepared, everything was perfect, but then I mentioned Uraraka and everything became strange. Izuku explained regretfully, looking for understanding in Mina's expression. Mina listened attentively, but couldn't contain her laughter when Izuku mentioned Sumi's reaction. Her laughter filled the room, leaving Izuku completely bewildered. Sorry, excuse me, Mina apologized with laughter, trying to contain herself. I thought it was something serious. Izuku looked at her in confusion, not understanding why Mina was laughing. It's not. She left without telling me anything and looked at me in a way. Izuku sighed, feeling exhausted by the situation. He hadn't slept well thinking about what had happened. Mina calmed down a bit, looking at Izuku with complicity. Look, what I want to tell you is that Tadu-chan is not mad at you, Izu. Mina said, trying to explain the situation to him. She's jealous because you mentioned another girl, silly. Izuku's confusion deepened even more. Jealous? But, why? Uraraka is just a friend, there's nothing between us. Izuku was puzzled by the idea that Sumi could be jealous about something like that. Mina shot him a complicit look. Ash. All men are just as dumb, they don't know how to pick up on the mood. She said with a chuckle, trying to make Izuku understand the situation from Sumi's point of view. You guys are complicated, why don't you just say what you feel? Mina let out an exasperated sigh, rolling her eyes at Izuku's comment. Because you men make everything more complicated than it should be. Why don't you just say what we feel and that's it? She replied in an amused but truth-laden tone. Izuku burst out laughing, enjoying their friendly little spat. Well, sometimes we need a little more hints. I don't know about others, but his hints aren't very easy to pick up on, don't you think? He said, defiantly. The two continued their banter, throwing sarcastic comments at each other and sharing laughs as they frolicked with each other. In a moment of distraction, they tripped and ended up on the ground, with Izuku underneath and Mina on top of him. For an instant, Mina was tempted to kiss Izuku, but restrained herself. She knew it wasn't the right thing to do, despite the attraction and love she felt for him. However, she couldn't resist snuggling into his chest, enjoying the comfort and warmth he exuded. You are very comfortable, Izuku. Murmured Mina, on the verge of falling asleep. Izuku watched her tenderly. Carefully, he got up from the floor as he carried her gently and laid her gently on the bed, gently stroking her hair. This time you win the fight, but not the war. I'll be back for a rematch. He said with a smile, trying to lighten the mood. She waved goodbye with a hand gesture and a smile, but Izuku didn't notice a tear escape from Mina's closed eyes. You're wrong, Izu. I already lost from the beginning. I lost you, Mina murmured before drifting off to sleep, silently wishing that in another life they could be together. Beginning of the form. It had been a week since the incident where Sumi had been upset with Izuku, and since then, she had been avoiding him. She felt foolish for getting mad at him over something so trivial. Meanwhile, Izuku kept looking for her, anxious to apologize and clear things up. One day, when Sumi was alone in the empty classroom, she was startled to hear Izuku's voice behind her. She tried to keep her composure, but her heart was pounding in her chest. I found you again, Izuku said, in a soft and conciliatory tone. Sumi slowly turned to him, feeling a little overwhelmed by his presence. I'm sorry, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I was very childish. I'm sorry. Izuku slowly approached her, his expression sympathetic. You know, Izuku whispered, already standing in front of her. With his hand he stroked the girl's hair and took a lock of her red hair. I'm more of a strawberries and cream kind of girl and I prefer it over Mochi. Sumi blushed at the comment, for she understood what Izuku meant. But she wanted to be sure. Strawberries and cream? She asked, curious. Yes, strawberries and cream. Izuku answered, with a tender smile. I mean I prefer sweet and soft things, like you. And strawberries make me remember how beautiful your hair is. Sumi was overwhelmed by the tenderness in Izuku's words. Her heart was beating even harder, but this time with a hint of hope. Sumi stammered, unable to find the right words to respond. Izuku moved a little closer, seeking her gaze gently. You don't have to apologize. I was also childish for mentioning Uraraka like that. It was a silly comment, I'm sorry. And if it upset you, I apologize for it. Sumi felt instant relief at hearing Izuku's sincere apology. Finally, she allowed herself to smile shyly. Thank you, Izuku. And I'm also sorry for my overreaction. It wasn't fair to you. Izuku shook his head gently. Don't worry about that. The important thing is that we're fine now, aren't we? Sumi nodded with a smile, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Yes, you're right. We are fine. She looked up, as she was fascinated by Izuku's emerald eyes, but felt embarrassed when he noticed. However, Izuku responded with a warm smile. Don't be nervous. You're beautiful to me too, he said tenderly. The girl blushed even more from embarrassment. "Oh, you're such a fool," Sumi muttered, dropping her head on Izuku's chest. "You always know how to make me feel like that, don't you?" Izuku laughed softly, moving closer to her and wrapping a comforting hug around her. "I'm just saying what I feel in my heart. And I love seeing you like that, with that adorable blush." Sumi steeled herself, sensing it was now or never. She broke away from Izuku's warm embrace, who was watching her curiously. "Izuku, I need to let you know something," Sumi began, her voice trembling but full of determination. "I love you. I love your kindness, I love how you get nervous and blush. And you're incredibly sexy when you do anything, and that makes my heart beat wildly." The comment left Sumi blushing even more, but she knew it was time to be honest. "I could say a myriad of things, but it all boils down to this: I love you, Izuku." Then, Sumi knelt down and her hand touched the ground and concentrated her ice quirk. Before Izuku's astonished gaze, she began to form a giant dome-shaped structure, where images of the moments they had shared together were projected. From their first meeting at the academy to the laughter shared on lonely nights where they both had fun. The memories came to life before his eyes, illuminating the room with flashes of happiness and complicity. Izuku was completely amazed by Sumi's skill and the beauty of that impromptu show. Izuku was amazed. "Since when can you do that?" "Since I met you," explained Sumi, with an excited smile. "Since I met you, the impossible became possible. But what I really want is this." With determination, Sumi approached Izuku, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him to her in a passionate kiss. It was a magical moment, full of intense emotions that would be etched in both of their minds and hearts forever. As they parted, Sumi looked at Izuku with eyes shining with emotion and love. "I love you too, Sumi-chan," Izuku admitted. "This is just the beginning of our story together, Izuku. I love you more than words can express. I am so grateful to have you in my life, Sumi," whispered Izuku, his voice soft but full of emotion. "You are my light in the darkness, my inspiration and my companion in this incredible adventure that is life." Sumi responded with an equally bright smile, her eyes reflecting all the love and admiration she felt for Izuku. "And you, Izuku," Sumi said in a soft voice. "You are my hero, my friend and my greatest joy. I can't wait to continue building our future together, overcoming every challenge and celebrating every victory." Holding hands, Sumi and Izuku gazed together at the ice dome that represented their history, filled with precious memories and promises of an even brighter future. With a feeling of determination and love, they said goodbye to that place, ready to face together whatever destiny had in store for them. End of the story. Original story by the author, Kudoff from Wattpad. I emphasize that I have changed some things in the story so as not to make a copy and paste. The next theory of my channel will possibly be from Aphrodite. Remember that on Sundays I will be reading your comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Remember that if you are not subscribed, you can help me grow on YouTube by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Finally, I have to inform that the manga episodes will be cancelled, because although I like the idea of uploading more episodes, I feel it has nothing to do with the main content of my channel.